me because it probably will do exactly the same as it's just done always. So, hi everyone, nice to see you. And please forgive me mid-conversation talking to our wonderful guests. So, my name's Claire. Nice to see you all. Claire Kennedy. I don't know if you know me or not, but if you don't, I am the founder and CEO of Kennedy Street, which is a very small charity, a recovery charity, and based in Brighton. And we offer support and signposting to anybody who's interested in recovery. And we offer volunteering opportunities as well to anybody who's in recovery. Yeah, we're really passionate about what we do. We've been very, very busy over the COVID period, and that's how these wonderful talks came about. So we thought we'd use our platform basically to introduce people to what is available, what's freely available where possible in our communities when it comes to recovery and connecting with resources and various fellowships and recovery projects and treatment, because nobody really knew where to go at the beginning of COVID. So that's how these talks came about. And we call these talks recovery talks because recovery really does talk. For those of you who do know me and have seen this show before, you're probably wondering where my wonderful husband is. So he's actually cruising around the Atlantic Ocean at the moment on a big ship called Anthem of the Seas, performing We Will Rock You, the Queen musical. So he's very, very happy indeed. Yeah, so today I'm really excited to say that we've got two wonderful guests who run a great project called Young and Sober. Have I got that right, Alex? Is that correct?
Yes, that's the one.
Fantastic. And it's in a podcast version form. So for those of you watching, we're going to fill you in with loads of information, and we will put some links in the comments as well, so you can actually access some of these talks. They are fabulous. I've listened to a few of them, and they are really interesting and just really informative. My daughter's been listening to them actually, and she's not got an addiction problem, but she doesn't drink much. And she's found them really interesting. She said she's always looking for something to do that doesn't involve getting absolutely pie-eyed. So, yes, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you both to Christian and to Alex. And we'll start off with, hi, lovely to see you both. We'll start off by asking you a couple of questions, if that's all right. So if you could tell us a little bit more about your fabulous project, Christian.
For sure. Yeah, thank you again for inviting us on. Because one of the big things we've been wanting to do is to really get the podcast out there more, and to see other people doing similar things and to champion it is we're really grateful. So thank you. The Young and Sober podcast was started up by the Young Persons Committee, which I started a couple of years ago. Young Persons Committee of South London Intergroup. So I came in as a Young Persons Liaison Officer, but I was slightly struggling to find ways to get people enthusiastic about sort of doing service, I guess, outside of AA. We managed to do a few sort of school talks and stuff, which were really great and really well received. But when lockdown hit, it was difficult to know how can we continue sort of carrying the message, not just in meetings, but outside of meetings, but not just in that sort of meeting setup. So we put our heads together during one of our committee meeting groups and talked about this idea of a podcast, which, to be quite honest with you, I don't know, you know what, like, alcoholics are like. We like to talk about things and not necessarily do anything about it. We like, so initially I thought, this is never going to get off the ground. And eventually we just committed to recording our first episode. And that was just called Introducing Young and Sober. Obviously I co-hosted it with Alex. And from there, we just committed to doing an episode a week. And it's been running now for so we've done an episode. What were we on? Episode 20, done 21 episodes, so that's 4 months. Is that right? Can't think of the math. Something like that. And yeah, each week we have focused theme with the idea of making AA recovery, positioning AA recovery as an appealing thing for younger people. So it's for people under the age of 30 that are already sober or considering sobriety, and to really kind of talk about our own experiences. Of course, we're just bog standard alcoholics. We're not experts in how to stay sober, nor do we represent Alcoholics Anonymous as a fellowship, but we can talk about our experience of being sober and moving from a life of not being sober to trying to live sober one day at a time, and covering off topics which, you know, we at least thought might be of interest to the listener when they are thinking about what their life might be like when they're sober. So we've covered spirituality, we've covered what work like, we've covered relationships, we've covered a whole host of different things. We've come to the end of the first series, and we're looking to sort of focus more on our experience of the steps, I think, in the second series. And yeah, it's been, I mean, Alex has done an amazing job behind the scenes, you know, getting it, like turning what was initially just like a Zoom call into kind of something that looks, you know, semi-professional. So it's exciting. And I guess the only frustration I have at the moment is not more people listening to it, you know, because I think there's some good nuggets in there. We always have a different guest on the show to talk about their experience. And yeah, we're really enjoying it.
Amazing. And is that how you two met then, Alex, about being trusted servants of the fellowship?
Yeah, so I moved to the same area that Christian was living in at the time, and I was looking for ways to kind of contribute and help out and kind of spread the word. And I heard from a mutual friend of ours that Christian was kind of leading a committee that were doing that. And so I was just really interested. And then when the podcast thing came about, I mean, I'd been considering doing a personal podcast for quite a long time. And like Christian said, just hadn't got around to it. And then as soon as the opportunity was presented to do it with a group of people, it just felt amazing because, you know, we've all got this huge thing in common, which is our recovery. And we're all hugely passionate about it. And especially, you know, with us having got sober under the age of 30, feeling like it was really important to spread the word to those people. And yeah, it's been really exciting, you know, and we've got to know each other really well over a few months. And even though Christian's moved to Brighton, obviously we record remotely, so it's brilliant. And yeah, that's kind of it.
Amazing. It is technology. I mean, I know COVID's been a terrible time for lots and lots of people, but I'm not going to lie, technology has transformed so many people's lives.
Yeah.
And we're so privileged to have, I mean, I've met, now we're going back into the community and I'm very actively involved in Brighton. I get to meet all these beautiful COVID babies that have emerged from getting sober in a pandemic. It's amazing, really amazing. So is that how it all got started? Did it kick off like in COVID during the pandemic?
Yeah, well, it kicked off. Yeah, we started it at the beginning. Yeah, near the beginning of, what was it? So if it was, yeah, it was during the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the main reason. And as you just said, like a lot of people have come in to recovery during a pandemic, and you know managed to actually recover. And I guess we just wanted in creating awareness around it all. And you know, we've had, which is really reassuring, it's slowed down a little bit, but certainly over the first few weeks we were getting lots of really positive feedback from people that we've never met, you know, that have listened to it and have said how helpful that it's been. You know, I remember there was somebody at one point saying, you know, they went to their first meeting after listening to the podcast, which is you know, if that, we said from the get-go on episode 1, like if this podcast potentially starts somebody's recovery journey, then we've kind of nailed it. And we, continually got feedback as time has gone on, or we've had people ask us questions and we've tried our best to answer them. So
yeah, I'm with you wholeheartedly. I mean, that's exactly my philosophy. Is if us doing this just reaches one person, and one person gets some hope even, or passes this message on to somebody who might need to hear some hope, then our work here is done. It's like, I'm sure we're reaching way many more than one person. So I think it's brilliant. I think, like I said earlier, I really do think it's relevant, and I really think it's relevant as well for young people. I know this is about people who might have had an alcohol problem primarily. I think there's so many young people. I've met so many young people. Part of what we do at Kennedy Street is we pilot different ideas to see what's going to help people in recovery to thrive. And one of the ideas was a dry bar, which was a safe, alcohol-free, drug-free environment that opens late, and you can dance your boobies off if you want, and do karaoke and all the fun things that people do when they're drunk, but in a sober space. And it was really successful, really, really successful. But what surprised me more than anything was the amount of young people that came that didn't have a drink problem. Like just young people that choose not to drink. And I think, you know what, there's so many more opportunities. Well, there should be way more opportunities for those people to connect, I think. So I think these sorts of things are great as well, because I'm sure they'll get loads of ideas. So what would you reckon the difference is? I mean, how old are you both, if you don't mind me asking?
So we're both 31, so we both got sober about 27.
Okay. So
I'm 32. I'm actually 32.
Sorry.
Oh, it's because you've got baby face, Christian. Is it? So you were officially under the age of 30 before you got sober. And what would you say the differences are when you start in your recovery under 30?
So, I mean, again, this is one of the main reasons that we decided to start the podcast, because I think there are young persons meetings, which are amazing, which kind of cater towards younger people. But I think when I first decided to get sober, I didn't realize that to start with. So a lot of the meetings that I went to, I was the youngest person there. And even though I did relate to, certain things of what people said, the main thing for me, I think, was that I almost didn't feel like I was bad enough. I felt like I needed to go out and like lose my job, lose my family, lose my home or whatever in order to be allowed or be deserving of this amazing thing that all these people were having. And as time went on, I realized that it's not necessarily for me about how much I drank. It was about why I drank and how it made me feel. But that took quite a lot of time. So I think the kind of awareness that we're trying to create is that everybody's rock bottom, or everybody's thing that makes them realize that they need to come into recovery, is different. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the fact that you've lost everything, or even lost anything, or that you're drinking every day or drinking all day. Because for me, I was an occasional binge drinker, but the results for me were so negative that it was just my time. It was time for me to stop. So I think that's one of the things that we hear time and time again with young people, is like, am I really bad enough? Like, am I actually an alcoholic? And then the other thing I think is the kind of social side of things, where when you're in your 20s, I mean, we've even got some friends who came in their late teens and kind of went through uni sober and all of that kind of stuff. And I think the kind of social environment for young people can be a lot more challenging in terms of drink, because I know for me, so many of my friends are still drinking a lot. They're still taking drugs, not necessarily addictively, but that is something that I believe that young people are kind of immersed in a little bit more. And so it does mean that you do have to kind of gear your sobriety towards managing those situations more than, say, somebody who's 10 or 20 years older might have to. So yeah, that for me is what I kind of believe are the main differences.
Any particular differences for you, Christian, coming in to recovery young?
I think your social life tends to be a little bit more. You tend to have much more of a social life, I think, as a younger person, particularly if you're like, you haven't got kids, particularly if you're single. Like, there's just a lot more free time. And if you've grown up with a group of friends which like to have a party, it can be difficult to kind of pull yourself away from it and be like, you know what, like this isn't okay. Like, this isn't normal behavior, or I'm not feeling okay with this, because you can kind of, I think it's really easy to mask it when you're hanging around with people. I know, like, obviously for older people, that's also the case. Like, you go to a pub, you'll find people that want to drink like you, but I think simply because we generally have a bit more free time. And I got sober when I was in London, and for me, I found it just, there was a pub on every corner, and it was, if I didn't have any plans, which rarely I made after work, the easy option was to go to the pub and find somebody else that was going to do that with me. And I think one of the if I were listening to the podcast, one of the things that I think I would find most interesting is, like, what does my life look like, when I'm sober? Because, your friendships change, and your social life changes, and there's some difficult obstacles to overcome as when you get sober. And, you start to realize who your real friends are. You start thinking, well, what do I do now, on the weekends? Like, what hobbies could I start? And there's all these questions which I think our podcast tries to answer.
Amazing. And just as a matter of interest, what hobbies did you start in recovery? I'm always curious. I'll tell you, I took up watercolors. I wasn't very good at it, but you know what? I found it really, really helpful to stop racing head.
Yeah.
So creativity for me was really important. What about you? Did you start any interesting hobbies?
I did, actually. So I got really into calligraphy, which I absolutely love. I've been writing a bit. I've been asked to write a few articles for kind of like mental health and recovery websites and stuff, which I'm really enjoying. And then kind of exercise, because honestly, when I was drinking, I never did any exercise whatsoever. So I've got really into yoga. I've even started running, which honestly, all of my friends will tell you is an absolute miracle. And yeah, I also got a dog in recovery about 2.5 years ago. So he is just the love and light of my life. So I spend a lot of time with him and just meeting loads of other friends with dogs and stuff. So it's, yeah, I think I'm just a bit more adventurous. And also, yeah, like you said, same as you, I've really been able to tap into a creativity that I felt like I couldn't really access before.
Yeah. And what about you, Christian? Did you take up any interesting hobbies? Getting fur babies. Fur babies.
I would just say that I got like more, like I reconnected with my sort of musical side. Like so I sing and I play guitar and that sort of thing. And when I was drinking, I didn't make the time for it because it just became less important. Despite the fact that it was like something that really, for me, is like, my soul. Yeah, that's the stuff that connects to my soul the most. When I sing and play guitar and perform, which I do now, that's what kind of makes me really happy. And I've been consciously, I guess what I've done in recovery is made very conscious decisions in terms of how I spend my time, like what I do for work, like in order to make the time to do the stuff that I love to do as well. Whereas before, I think I was just, going through the motions, like, and essentially living a life which I wanted to escape from. And drinking was the solution for me, there was just no time for hobbies because I needed to escape from this life that I was living, which just wasn't authentically me. So that's a huge thing that recovery's given me. It's, that the old saying, to thine own self be true. That's definitely been the case for me, for sure.
That's amazing. It's true, isn't it? It's once we're not anaesthetized anymore with the right tools in place. I do think that the right tools, and obviously the steps are an amazing tool bag to help you find your true self, and to be able to flourish and just to be able to become your authentic self, like you said, and to become the people that we were meant to be. That's the way I look at it. I spent a lot of time creating this life and this persona that I really didn't like, to be honest. And it was hard work, and it was weighing me down and making me worse every time I went out and did more stupid things, more embarrassing things, more things that I was ashamed of. It was just like compounding the problem. Whereas recovery helped me strip all that away and start with a new tool bag. But like you say, creativity. I love the fact that you both got some creativity, because I find that doesn't only help my mind, but it helps my soul as well. It connects the two. It's a real whole body experience. And I don't know if just completely nothing to do with our chat, but one of the guys that came on our show a couple of weeks ago was a guy called Chris Bank, and he has set up. Have you heard of it? Chris Bank is set up.
I know Chris. Yeah.
Do you? He's set up a recovery recording label. So I'm just thinking for you, Christian, with your singing and your music.
Still waiting for the email to come through. It's still
waiting for the call. Right?
It must be in my spam folder. Yeah.
I think you need to check your junk box. I think if he's not sent you the email, maybe we can do some cyber stalking after this, and we can make him see sense.
Hunt him down, yeah.
Yeah, hunt him down. But he's a lovely guy, really lovely guy. He came on. Now, before we go any further, I just want to acknowledge that one of our regular tuner-inners, a guy called Jim, who is a lovely man. I feel like I've known him for a long time because we've been engaging in conversation for a good while. But he's celebrating his 1 year today. How fantastic is that? Let's give it a
Congratulations.
So proud of you, Jim. I can't even begin. It's making me feel choked up because I know how hard it's been for him. So well done, Jim. That's amazing. Really amazing. Yeah, so I'm going to get back to us now. So for each episode that you create on your podcast, you focus on one aspect of being sober. How do you decide on your topics?
So, so to begin with, we basically just thought about the things that we were really worried about when we first got sober, and the things that we still worry about. I mean, for me, dating was a huge area of anxiety and fear for me, dating sober. So we did a episode on that fairly early on, and then socializing as well, because I think a lot of us, there was a whole committee of us kind of behind recovery, and the podcast, and we just wanted to focus on areas that we were really worried about. Am I going to still be able to have a social life? How am I going to date when I can't go for a drink for the first date? What happens with work colleagues and Christmas parties and celebrations and New Year's Eve, and all of the areas of worry that came up for us, we just decided to talk around. And then the steps as well, because we cater, like you do actually, the podcast to people who maybe don't know much about recovery. So we really like to be able to explain the steps in a really, really kind of layman's understandable way. we're now doing an episode on the steps once a month. So we've just done step 1 a couple of weeks ago, and in a couple of weeks we'll be doing step 2, and so on and so forth. And I think, yeah, we're just trying to make recovery as attractive as possible, and just to generally spread the word that you know, your life doesn't have to end just because you're getting sober.
I think that's brilliant, and I think it's absolutely like we said before when we were off camera. There's a lot of like words that we use when you're in recovery. There's a lot of words that other people in recovery use that you understand because you're in recovery, but I think it's really, really important. And one of the main reasons why we did what we did was to do the demystifying of the recovery process. You know, we're all encompassing. We don't just focus on one particular fellowship, because in the 23 years I've been sober, I've met many people from many fellowships, but also from many routes to recovery too. You know, some people with faith recovery, one friend who's got Buddhist recovery, another friend who used volunteering in a donkey sanctuary, and he's like 24 years sober, and he created this amazing project for abandoned donkeys, and that's what kept him sober. You know, he found his calling. You know, so what we try and do is we try and help people understand that actually there are key elements to any recovery journey. And what we try and do is to just share other people's experience, strength and hope, in the hope that other people might just get a glimmer of hope themselves and think, oh gosh, that resonates. Because as you two know, it starts with us, doesn't it? It starts with us. Every time we point the finger and want to blame the alcohol for our problem, there's 3 pointing back at us and 1 at the solution. You know, the only one who can do anything about it is yourself, and you can only do it with some outside help. So absolutely brilliant. Well done. I think that demystifying process and steps, you know, that it's not like trying to, it is a little bit like trying to understand another language. So it's great that you can give us a young person's perspective and to help simplify it, you know. So well done for that. Really, really want to encourage you to keep going with that one. Because they are beautiful tools. They are beautiful tools that are applicable to lots and lots of different addictions, you know, and addictive behaviours as well. So what would you do? What sort of personally, if you could say one thing to young people watching, what top tip would you give? What would you leave them with? What would you say?
We're talking about a young person that's considering sobriety, or
yeah. So if the young person watching and they think they might have a bit of a drink problem, what is the best? Obviously, I know we don't give advice, but what top tips would you give them? Where would you suggest they start, or where did you start, if that's easier?
I think, you know, my experience was, you know, about a year before I actually decided to go in, I answered the kind of the questions, you know, am I the self-diagnosis, am I an alcoholic? I think it was.
Where are those questions?
Those are on the AA website, I believe. And there's also literature. There's a kind of starter pack as well, isn't there, which you can get from the online store, which will you know, it's like a little bit about AA, and I think it says who me, and it's like, and you can sort of answer some questions, and if you answer X amount, then essentially they're saying, you know, you've got a problem and you may want to do something to address it. My experience in terms of like actually, I mean, anyone is welcome, whether you work the steps. You don't need, there's no prerequisites. You can just go in. Oh,
all right.
Is that okay? You can just go in. Okay. Yeah, you can just go in and just listen, sit and listen in a meeting and see see if it's for you or not. However, my experience in terms of actually going through the process of recovery, which is with a sponsor. I won't go too much into like the nuts and bolts, but a sponsor is just another alcoholic who has worked the 12 steps of recovery. And it's a wise man once said, why go to a 12-step meeting and not work the 12 steps? Right. So if you're going to go into one of these meetings, what is suggested is getting yourself a sponsor who is somebody that's got a bit more time under their belt, that is working a 12-step program one day at a time. So that would be my suggestion. However, my experience was that I really needed to be on my knees, desperate to commit, because it does require effort. You know, it requires some work, and you need to be willing to, you know, put your life on hold for a bit. You know, to me, it was suggested in my first year. You know, if you can put things on hold as much as possible, you know, no big decisions in your first year, just focus on doing the recovery stuff, and then maybe then think about the other things. Because for me, recovery is much more than just putting down alcohol. It's given me so much more than that. Self-awareness, confidence, clarity, just so many amazing things. And last thing I'd say is, you know, don't leave before the miracle happens, because if you're anything like me, you like to self-sabotage and, you know, just throw things in the towel just as they're getting good. Stick with it. Stay close to the fellowship, stay close to your sponsor, and take on their suggestions. And it really does, you know, it's a magical thing. So that's what I would say to anyone that's new, whether they're young or old, actually. But I can only talk about my own experience. I was 27 when I came in, and that's what I did.
Yeah, brilliant, amazing. And what about you, Alex? Have you got any nuggets that you'd like to? Any nuggets that you would like to leave with the listeners?
Yeah, I think kind of like I shared earlier, I like to think about what I would say to myself when I came in, and kind of what my worries were. And I think the main thing is, first of all, is money costing you more than is alcohol costing you more than money? Sorry. You know, is it affecting your mental health? Is it affecting your relationships? Is it negatively impacting your job, your finances, any of those things? And for me, the answer to all of those was yes. But I think, you know, the main thing that caused me to come in is that my mental health was just completely deteriorated. I was miserable all the time. And that was kind of what prompted me to come in, because I was just, you know, I couldn't live like that anymore. I just couldn't, and I didn't want to. So I think if you do have that sensation, then it doesn't necessarily mean that you are an alcoholic, but it's definitely worth trying to find out. And the way to do that is to go to meetings and just see if you hear something that you identify with. And, you know, like Christian said, I came in because I wanted to stop drinking, and then realized that recovery was about so much more than that. And I think the thing for me about my first few meetings was that I started to hear people not only sharing about drinking, but they were describing the way that they felt about the world and the way that they felt about themselves. And I really, really identified with that. So I think, yeah, just getting stuck in, trying to go to meetings. And if you don't identify straight away, maybe try a few different ones. You might not, you might not connect with the first meeting or even the second or the third, but I tried doing it at least for a couple of weeks, going to meetings as frequently as possible. And chances are you will hear somebody that you'll connect with. And one of the wonderful things about AA and the recovery community is that people are so friendly and so open, and, you know, ask questions, you know, go up to people and say hello and ask questions. I remember my first meeting, I met a lovely woman who I haven't actually seen since, but she sat next to me and I was so nervous, and she just explained to me exactly what to expect, what I had to say, what I didn't have to say. I mean, telling me I didn't have to say anything if I didn't want to. And just what to expect from the first meeting, because for me, I have so much anxiety around not knowing what's going to be expected of me, and she knew that because she was like me. So yeah, ask questions, try a few meetings, and is alcohol costing you more than money? If so, I think it's worth, for me, it was worth just giving it a go and eventually hearing something that I identified with and realizing that I was in the right place.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I can't reiterate that more. Excuse the noise in the background. I've got a noisy background too, Christine, you'll be pleased to hear. I've got builders outside, so if you hear them talking randomly, it's the builders, it's not us. No, but I you know, the only requirement is a desire to live a life free of alcohol, isn't it? That's the only requirement for attendance. And I too would reiterate, like you said, both of you, you know, just go along if you're not sure. I know for me personally, when I started to attend 12-step meetings, I went really with the wrong intention, but I stayed for the right reasons. So I went hoping that that I was going to learn that I didn't have a problem. I thought somebody was going to say to me, "What are you doing here? Go on your bike. You know, you're not one of us." Nobody actually did say that ever. And like you say, it's such a relief to be amongst people who the only thing that they want from you is for you to have a better life. There's no ulterior motives. People just want you to be content with your lot. You know, so absolutely. And like you guys said, you know, just get to as many meetings as possible. If anyone's listening and thinking, you know, what do I need to do? I'd say, like you also said, listen for those similarities and not the differences. Because for the first length of time when I went to meetings, I really did try really hard to listen for the differences. I hadn't been to prison. Well, I had, but I'd not been to prison in this country, so that didn't count. In my head, it wasn't true. I didn't drink in the morning. Well, actually, I did drink in the morning, but only on holiday. You know, and I used to go on a lot of holidays, so I used to drink a lot in the morning. But again, I was listening for the differences. You know, I'd not lost my kidneys. My liver was still intact. I used to think, maybe that means I'm not one. And the thing is if you listen for those differences, you're never going to get the message. You're never going to get the light in your life. And I think if you listen for the similarities, I think it doesn't take long before the penny drops, does it? So
yeah, totally. I was similar to you. Like I wasn't, and that there are people in the rooms which you hear stories of, you know, morning drinking, sneaky bottles of vodka in their handbags at work, and that was not my experience, you know. But the problem was that when I did take a drink, certainly towards the end, you know, I had little to no control of what was going to happen, and that was pretty scary, you know. And 99.9% of behavior which I'm ashamed of or not proud of is directly as a result of drinking. And it was really refreshing to hear that it wasn't the second drink, it wasn't the fifth drink, it wasn't the 10th drink, it was the first drink that does the damage. So if I've got a way that can stop me from taking that first drink, then those types of things are not going to happen, you know. And thank God. Thank God for that.
I know. It's such a relief. It is such a relief. And so before we finish, just if you can fill us in a little bit more, Alex, as to how people can find you. So if people are listening, really interested, or they want to send this, getting one of their young people to get involved, listening to one of your podcasts, how will they find you?
Yeah, so we have an Instagram where we share kind of updates about the podcast and a few quotes and all of that, maybe some suggestions, all of that kind of stuff. And that's at Young and Sober Podcast. There's a link to the podcast on there, and that also has a link with all of the different platforms that we're on. So we're on Anchor, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Podbean, we're on so many different ones, and there's a separate link for each one of the platforms that we're on there. And then we've also got an email, which is youngandsober@outlook.com. So we're so happy to, hear from people. And also if people want to direct message us and ask specific questions, we love addressing questions on the podcast. We actually try to do that weekly. So yeah, if people have any questions about anything they've heard, or about just something they're worried about, or, a conversation that they'd like to have, or anything, or even suggestions for episodes, we'd absolutely love to hear from people. I think that's kind of it, really.
That's amazing, really amazing. And we've got a message here off Ryan. I'll show this message. It says, "Is 80 days alcohol free on the 1st of July. Wish you'd done it years ago. So many better things to be doing with your life. These guys deserve a lot of praise for working with the younger generation." You know what? I think at any age, I think particularly, I do think there's a whole lot of work that needs doing. Since lockdown, we've had a lot of young people, not so much the young people, but the family members of the young people ringing in, trying to get help for their young people. And, this country, unfortunately, there aren't any sort of places that you could go that like we've got rehabs for adults and places like that. There aren't any places like that for young people, or retreats, or, sober clinics, or mental health clinics that, help people focus on abstinence. Because I personally believe that if you've got a mental health problem, the worst thing you can put on it is alcohol and drugs or addictive behaviours, because it's just going to compound the mental health problem. The only place I actually found when I was doing some research for young people was in Holland, a clinic called Yes We Can. And the Dutch government, they pay for their young people to go into that place. And they introduce them to 12-step recovery and all sorts of amazing tools, creative tools that can help them to go on into their lives and flourish. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of work that needs doing in this country, I really do. But I'm so glad to have met you two, because what you're doing it will be life-changing, and is life-changing, I'm sure, for very many. I know for you too, it's been life-changing. But I think, getting yourselves out there and, being willing to be of service on a public platform, it's really important. And brave as well. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And yeah, we'd love you to come back. What have you got next? What podcasts have you got to look forward to?
We've got our step 2 one, and then Christian, do you remember which other ones we've got next? I think we've got social media. That's one of them, because I think there's such a big sobriety community on social media. So we're going to be chatting a bit about that and trying to get someone in who is open about their recovery on social media and kind of uses it as a platform. So we're going to be talking about that.
We'll be brainstorming a bit about other themes. We're having a break at the moment for that very reason, because it takes a little bit of creativity in terms of coming up with themes, and also we don't just want to do an episode which is a theme that we've kind of rushed or come up with, which isn't necessarily that useful. And actually, having done sort of the analytics on some of the episodes, some get a lot more listens than others. So that's been really interesting. So we're going back to the drawing board, and we'll have a think about what's coming next.
Yeah.
It sounds exciting, and this time that you're taking to get your vision together, it is important. It is really important. There's so many subjects that we're looking at. One of them, sober holidays. You know, where do you start with that one? There's so few places, so we've got a lot. It's a really good one, but look, we'd love you to keep in contact. We think what you're doing is absolutely critical.
Thank you.
We'll champion you as much as we can, and keep up the great work. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to come and talk to us all.
Thanks so much for having us. This has been wonderful, and we'd absolutely love to stay in touch.
Yeah, do. Please come back. Like I say, if we can help spread your message, that's what we've been created for. That's what we've set up this platform for, to celebrate the fact that there are amazing fellowships out there doing stupendous work, and great young people too, wanting to make a difference. So thank you from all of us.
Thanks
And
again.
yeah, you're welcome. Nice to see you, Christian. Lovely to meet you, Alex. And we'll see you all next week, hopefully, or the week after. I think the week after we'll be back. So thanks everyone for watching and listening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.